In tonight's Dateline Defense, the logistics of war. President Obama says U.S. troops will be pulling out of Afghanistan by 2016. There have been boots on the ground since 2001. So how complicated is a withdrawal? For insight, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, U.S. Marine Corps Logistics Officer Jeff Clement. He's an Afghan veteran and author of The Lieutenant Don't Know. Jeff, during your 2 years in Afghanistan, you worked with combat logistics. Through your deployments, you and your men were responsible for moving high-tech weaponry to and from the front lines. How complicated was it to keep all of that equipment safe?
Well, you know, it's a little different than moving something here in the United States. You don't have roads in most of Afghanistan, in particular the Helmand province where I was. So moving anything, most of it was done by ground convoy, anywhere between 20 and 200 heavily armored vehicles. And these were not just, you know, jump in your truck and drive to where you were going. These were, you know, heavily coordinated and sophisticated operations incorporating air support, the drones, the surveillance, everything like that, to move from point A to point B, to deliver the required food, fuel, ammunition, equipment, anything else that was needed to keep the combat effort moving, and often in the face of heavy enemy resistance. You know, big trucks are slow, and so they make a good target for enemy insurgents, ambushes, small arms fire, rocket-propelled grenades, IEDs, everything like that.
Now, in 2011, at the height of American involvement, there were more than 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. Now, President Obama says the number will be less than 10,000 by the end of this year. Looking at the current troubles in Iraq with terrorists threatening Baghdad, do you feel the mission is complete in Afghanistan, or is there more work to be done?
You know, that's a really good question, and sort of paralleling some of what's going on in Iraq. There have been rumblings in the northern Helmand province, some of the areas that I went to, Nowzad, Sangin, Musa Kela. My Marines and I, you know, were part of the push there, that the Taliban is gaining strength. So it's disheartening to see some of this stuff, you know, ground that you fought for and you sacrificed for, you lost friends for in both Iraq and Afghanistan. But what we have to remember is that, you know, regardless of the outcome at that time and place, you know, our Marines did their job, and they did it with honor. Now, that being said, we need to not fall into the trap of sort of chasing our sunk costs. It's a very difficult question, but, you know, we've been extraordinarily successful militarily. We win the fights, we win the engagements, but at the end of the day, if a military solution isn't going to deliver what's needed, then we need to start looking at some other things. You know, and of course, we build roads and schools and dig wells and all that sort of thing, but really the solution needs to be driven by the people who are living there, and if the people who are living there don't see that stable outcome that we sort of have envisioned, it's doubtful whether or not we'll be able to deliver it at gunpoint.
You put that in a very eloquent way. Now, given your experience with combat logistics, how would a drawdown in Afghanistan look? What's the process like, and how long would it take?
Well, the drawdown, as you mentioned, there were, you know, a height of over 100,000 troops. So the drawdown actually began when the troop surge ended. And so we've really refined the processes over the years. You know, I'm not there now. Obviously, there are other people there doing that today. But, you know, it basically starts with an inventory, everything you've got, every position you have, every piece of equipment. You inventory it from 1 all the way to 1 million or however many items there are. And you figure out for each position, are the Afghan forces going to take over this position, or is it just going to be demilitarized? So all the equipment will be pulled out. If we're leaving anything for the Afghans, that will be turned over to the Afghan National Security Forces. If we're not, we will backhaul everything and then demilitarize or demill that base, essentially bulldoze it back to flat ground so that we don't provide a fortress for any insurgents who might like to take over it. So very logistics heavy, and I would wager that most of the troops, or a majority of the troops in Afghanistan now, are on the logistics end of the fight and less on the combat arms.
Right. Jeff, before you go, let's talk about your book, The Lieutenant Don't Know. It's an interesting title. What's the story behind it?
Well, you know, I wanted to hook the reader a little bit. Just make a long story short, I was a 22-year-old lieutenant. I was in command of a platoon of Marines, and I was walking down one of the little dirt paths in Afghanistan on Camp Leatherneck, and I heard a junior Marine from another unit being berated for something he'd done. I don't know what he did, but his staff NCO asked him why he did that, and he said, well, the lieutenant told me to. And his staff NCO ago, without missing a beat, said the lieutenant don't know. And so I thought that was pretty poignant. You know, you're book smart, but you have a lot to learn about the profession of arms.
Real life versus what you're told and what you've studied. Well, good luck to you. Thanks for your service to our country. U.S. Marine Corps Logistics Officer Jeff Clement, Afghan veteran and author. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Morris.